Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to be making some sourdough discard banana spice muffins, and then we had a leftover New York strip from last night's dinner, so we are going to make a yummy steak and cheddar melt on our sourdough bread. So let's start with our cupcakes. I do have my oven preheating to 375 degrees, and now we're going to start on the base for our banana spice cupcakes. And then we're gonna make a cream cheese frosting with it. So you want to use 3 very ripe bananas. So I like to give mine a little bit of a squeeze before I push it in. That just helps with the mushing process. You do not wanna use like unripe bananas. They need to be like black and brown, something that you wouldn't necessarily eat, because that is when they have the most naturally occurring sugars in it and will give you the most flavor and the best texture. So we're gonna give this just a quick little whip to kind of mash it up. There we go. So we've got them kind of mashed up and they're getting nice and a little soupy. Now we're going to add in our sugars. So we're going to add in 1 cup of granulated sugar. And then a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. So we're going to want that nice kind of molasses flavor to pair out well with the spices, because this is a banana spice cupcake. So we need a 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar. So I'm just gonna push it in, pack it down. The reason we pack down brown sugar is because it kind of holds together really lightly, unlike granulated sugar that stacks on top of each other, just because there is molasses, the moisture in it. So you always wanna pack it down so you're making sure you're getting the right amount. So a 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar. I'm going to take these 2 and put them behind me since we're done with them. And then we're going to give these a little mix as well to incorporate them into the bananas. And now you should have kind of like a banana soup. It's very liquidy, but that's just the natural sugars and the juices of the bananas coming out and dissolving with the sugar. Okay, so the way I do my cupcakes so I don't have to do the sifting is we're gonna do all the wet ingredients first, then we'll add our baking powder and salt, and then we'll add our flour at the very end. So we're gonna move on to some eggs. We're gonna add in 3 eggs. There we go. Recently, eggs have not been as hard to come by. We had a stretch for about a month to a month and a half where eggs were impossible. I just could not find them anywhere. They were just like gone. I had bought quail eggs. I was finding everything. Then we're gonna add in 3/4 cup of melted butter and 3/4 cup whole milk. You can use other milk, but whole milk is what we have. And I tend to think that with baking, milk with higher fat just adds a nicer flavor and texture. And we're gonna give this a quick little whip up. And incorporate this into our bananas and sugar. And then I'm gonna go get my sourdough discard, and we're gonna be adding 3/4 cup of sourdough discard. So I've got my sourdough right here, my sourdough starter, and we'll need to feed it today. So I'm gonna take off, and we're gonna use 3/4 of a cup. Grab a spatula here, give it a nice little stir. And then I'm gonna fill up my cup. Let me visually see where I need to be right there. And now you can use active starter if you have it. We're not using it for the rising agent, really just so that we can feed our sourdough starter after this and not have a mountain of it, and a nice little flavor to it. So here is 3/4 of a cup of sourdough starter. Use my spatula to scoop this out. Perfect. I'm always looking for different recipes to try to use up my sourdough discard, because I like to always make a couple loaves of bread a week, which means I have a lot of discard. And these are a nice little thing. They're kind of a mix between a muffin and a cupcake, and it's a nice little treat. So we've got 3/4 of a cup of sourdough discard that we're adding to our banana muffins. And then we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So 1, 2. And we're going to give this a nice little whip up until it's just combined. Perfect. Now we're going to add in our spices, salt, and baking powder. So for the baking powder, we are going to use 1 tablespoon of baking powder, not baking soda. If you do baking soda, you'll have a mountain of muffins. There we go. So 1 tablespoon of baking powder. Then we're going to use 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. And then we're going to use a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg and a 1/2 teaspoon of cloves. These are going to give you that nice kind of wintry spice flavor to the banana cupcakes. So here is 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg and 1/2 teaspoon of cloves. Kind of smells like Christmas right now. It gives you that nice Christmassy smell. And then we are going to add in a teaspoon of salt, and we're going to give this a nice little stir, and then it will be time to add the flour. Okay. So putting in our baking powder now means we don't have to sift it into our flour and add it, so it saves a step. Perfect. Now we're going to add 3 cups of all-purpose flour into our mix. You don't want to use bread flour or cake flour. You want to use all-purpose flour for this. So we need 3 cups. So 1, 2, 3. And now we're gonna mix this. Now the key is, if you want a nice soft cupcake, is not to over mix it. So we're just gonna mix it until it's just combined, and then I'll finish it off with a spatula. If you over mix it, you'll get a really stiff batter, like cupcake or muffin. We're just gonna mix it until it's just combined, and then we'll finish off with a spatula. Okay, and then I'm gonna finish mixing with a spatula because I want a nice soft cupcake. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna scrape around for any flour that's at the top, and then we'll just mix it in. There we go. And this is the batter for our banana spice cupcakes using sourdough discard. So I've got our cupcake finers and we're gonna light it out. Then we'll start on our steak and cheddar melts. We'll work on those. Then we will make our frosting for our cupcakes. We're gonna do a cream cheese frosting for the, it works really well with the spices. Okay. And let me get a spoon to scoop these out with. I find using a metal spoon is much easier to fill up the cupcakes than using like a silicone spoon. It just falls off a metal spoon much nicer. So we're gonna go through, I'll fill them up and try to get them evenly, and then I'll go through again and give them a little bit more. I like to fill my cupcakes up kind of to the top because I like them to have a nice big dome on them. There we go. And since this recipe uses butter over oil, you'll have a much thicker batter. You can always swap it out for like an equal part of oil if you wanted to. But I do find that butter gives just a better texture and flavor to baked goods than oil does. So I always use butter. And get here. Fill all of these guys up with our banana spice cake, and we used our sourdough discard in it. It's a great way. I'm gonna go through now and just kind of top off everyone. Just make sure they're nice and even. You can always, your middle two cupcakes will not puff up as fast as the outside. So if you want your cupcakes all to cook at the exact same time and be perfect, you can just leave the middle two ones just slightly less batter in it, and then they will all cook evenly. They're insulated by the outer layer of the cupcakes. Or if you have one of those huge cupcake sheets, then you just can cook every one except the middle two, and you'll have perfect cupcakes as well. So we'll fill these up, and then I'm gonna use the rest of this batter in a loaf pan to make some banana spice loaf. There we go. So we've got our cupcakes all filled out. Let me get, we'll do our cupcake. Let me get a little non-stick spray. Okay, so I'm gonna spray this is like a fancy little button pan, but I love it because it has individual slices, so when my kids take it, they can just take a lid. So you're gonna wanna give it a good spray down with some non-stick baking spray. I love to use the baking one. It has flour in it, so it just helps for things not to stick as much. I do have my oven preheated to 375 degrees. So we're gonna scoop the rest of this batter out into here. I'm gonna go around our little fancy bundt cake. I'll rotate. There we go. And scoop it out, fill it up. And the bundt cake will take much longer to cook than the cupcakes. The cupcakes will take about, 20 minutes max, around 18 to 20 minutes. But the bundt cake will take closer to 30 to 45 minutes to cook. So, perfect. Let me just get this last little scoop out. Don't want any of it to go to waste. Beautiful. And then I'm gonna give this just a nice little shake, even it out, give them a nice little shake. And we're gonna go put these in the oven at 375 degrees. So I'm gonna put this down. I've got my cupcakes in and my bundt. And now I'm gonna set my timer for, we're gonna start with 17 minutes and we'll come check on them. I always like to cut it short because you don't want to overcook. If you overcook, then they're never good. Okay, let's prep on our steak and cheddar melts while we're waiting, and then we'll make our cream cheese frosting. So last night we had a New York strip extra from dinner, so we're going to saute it up, and then we're going to add it to our homemade sourdough bread with some sharp cheddar to make a yummy steak and cheddar melt. So we're gonna put a little bit of butter in my saute pan over here, and I'm gonna just let it start to warm up. And then with the New York strip, I'm gonna cut off the fat strip on it because that won't be good in our steak. Here we go. And then I'm just going to really thinly chop up our steak into nice thin strips. So if you were with us last night, we seared up our New York strips. We did a pan sear and then we finished them off in the oven. So we have a beautiful, they were a nice medium rare last night. And we served them with pasta in a creamy tomato basil sauce. And it was lovely. But the steaks were so big, we had one whole one left over, which is perfect for steak and cheddar melts. And I think this last part is just fat and cartilage. Perfect. So now we're gonna come over, we're gonna let our butter melt. And in here, we're not cooking the steak, we are warming it up so that the cheeses will melt on our grilled cheeses. So we're not necessarily cooking it, and I'm just gonna actually cut these each in half so that when you're eating your steak and cheddar melt, you're not getting a huge strip that might be a little bit harder to manage. I always think about when I'm cooking or prepping an ingredient, how we're supposed to eat it, therefore what size it should be. Okay, and we're just gonna place our steak in here, and we're gonna let it warm up. Give my hands a quick wash. I will say a steak and cheddar melt is one of my favorites to do with leftover steak, or in the summer when we are smoking a brisket. The next day, if you have leftover brisket, a brisket and cheddar melt, so good. Especially, I will say, my brother-in-law, he is like an amazing griller, and he smokes this just delicious brisket, and it is so good when we make it as things. So this was our Gouda black pepper and thyme loaf. It was so delicious. My husband said it was his favorite loaf that I have made so far, and he requested this one for our steak and cheddar melts. So I'm gonna cut ours in here. But it turned out so good. The pepper was just you could tell it was there, but it wasn't overpowering. And it just he said, it reminded him of when you go to the Italian restaurants and they have that nice Italian bread and you dip it in the oil with black pepper and salt. And he said, he's like, it just tastes like that, so fresh and delicious. And Gouda is such a great cheese to work with in bread because it's not overpowering, but it gives it a nice texture in here. So here we've got for our steak and cheddar melts, just a little bit left. Perfect. Now we're going to spread a little bit of butter on each side, but before we do that, I'm just gonna give my steak a quick toss. I don't wanna cook them up too much. I want them to stay nice and a nice medium rare so that they'll be delicious in our things, but I do want them to be a little bit warmed up. Perfect. now I'm just gonna turn off the heat of my pan and I'm gonna remove it off because my burner is still hot and it will continue to cook it. So they've warmed up nicely. Now we're going to spread a little bit of room temperature butter on one side of each slice of bread. Perfect. And there we go. And this is because I don't put butter on my skillet. I just butter the bread on the outside because that's all it needs, and that will help make sure that crisps up, but won't have any of your milk solids from the butter burn on the pan. Always the worst is when I don't have room temperature butter, and I'm like, oh, I've got to put the butter in there. So I always make sure I'm always leaving a stick out on there. But you never know when my kids walk by and all of a sudden everyone decides to have toast and then they use up all the butter and they never put another stick out, because that's children for you. They like to take, but never replace. So we're using a sharp, extra sharp or white cheddar. I find that cheddar really works well with this, especially white cheddar. I think it works best with the steak, but a Gouda is also a good second, or a Havarti, but cheddar just has a nice natural sharpness for it. And even though I feel like white cheddar and like regular cheddar, they taste similar, I'm like a fan for white cheddar. I like it a little bit better. Okay, now we're going to put our strips of meat that we have warming up, and we're gonna line them across our cheese. Now this warming them up will help with the cheese melting as well, because if we were to put our cold strips on, our meat would stay cold. It would never really get warm, just because a skillet has to heat all the way through the bread and the cheese to get it to going. So we're gonna do a nice even layer across our cheese and our bread. This will be so delicious. I know my husband was really excited when he found out that this was the grilled cheeses I was going to be making today. I'll say it's not often that we have extra steak, because my kids just absolutely love steak, all of them. My 1-year-old, I have to mince it up for him, but he loves it. But my 3-year-old loves it. My 9-year-old, my son is always like, I want the biggest steak. Okay, we've got a nice.
You got a question? What cut of meat?
This is a New York strip. So we made New York strips last night, and we had one left over. So I cut off the big fat strip on the New York strip, and then I kind of chopped it up here. We warmed it up in there. And now I'm just gonna put my second layer of cheddar or cheese. When you're putting the cheese, you just wanna make sure that your cheese is not gonna overflow and get on your skillet. So make sure it's not bigger than your bread, otherwise that will burn up and will give you kind of a burnt taste. So it won't be as nice. And got one piece left. So let's put our last little one. I think this guy's a little bigger, so we'll put him here and there. And then I'm gonna turn my skillet on to a medium, and we're gonna let it start to cook up and brown and melt the cheese. Move this out of the way, and we're gonna work on our frosting now. So, where did I put my egg beaters? We're gonna need those. I'm gonna give these a quick wash because we're gonna whip up our frosting with them. I know, I feel like I need to buy an extra set of the beaters, because that's the thing that I use the most. I never use the whisk, or when there's like a dough attachment. If I'm gonna be whisking something, I'll use my stand mixture. So I only ever use the beaters. Okay, so we're gonna be making a simple cream cheese frosting today. So I've got 1 stick of room temperature butter, and I took my cream cheese out. So this is a pound, I believe, or 8 ounces. This is 8 ounces, so. I always like my ratio. Some people do like equal parts, like double. I like to do 1 stick of butter to kind of 2 sticks of, if you look at it, it would be like 2 sticks of cream cheese. It kind of just gives it a nice, kind of a sharp flavor with it. But there's different variations to it. Some people do just straight up cream cheese, no butter, with their things. So I like to do, 2 parts cream cheese to 1 part butter. So we've got our stick of butter here. And then we're just gonna whip these two together real quick, and then we'll add in our powdered sugar and some vanilla to our mixture to make our frosting. Let's put these guys in. And we're gonna start whipping it. I always like to whip them up first, then add it in, because if you try to put the powdered sugar in first, it'll just go poof.
You have a question. Is that unsalted butter?
It's salted butter. I only ever buy salted butter. I know a lot of bakers like to use it, but I like to have always a little salt in there, and we eat it, and unsalted butter is like the worst to eat on bread. It's just missing the salt. So this is salted butter. There we go. Okay, now we're gonna add our powdered sugar, but we're gonna add it in a little by a little, because if you try to add it all in at once, you're gonna have a sugar cloud. It's gonna go poof. So I'm just gonna add in, we're gonna start with a cup. We're probably gonna be using around 2 to 3 cups of powdered sugar. I kind of look for it at the texture of it and how it's holding together, and then I'll of course taste it to see where it's my flavor. I'm not a fan of super sweet frostings. But before we do that, I am hearing a little sizzle on my skillet, which means we're gonna do our first flip of 4. So this flip is mainly, this is not done, this is just to warm up the bread and start the melting process on our steak and cheddar, not to get the golden crisp. The golden crisp is when we'll flip it on and do it for the next 2 times. So this is to start the melting process. We're going to incorporate this in nice and slowly. If you try to do too fast, again, you'll have that sugar cloud. So there's our first cup. And then I'm going to add my vanilla now, and then we'll add our next cup of powdered sugar. So we're going to use, it's going to be 1 teaspoon of vanilla, but this one's full of salt, so I'm just going to use my 1.5 teaspoon and just use it a little less. There we go. So 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then we're going to add in another cup of powdered sugar. And I'm going to just turn this down just a little. And we're going to start whipping this in as well. And I make sure that I'm using the sides of my bowl to whip the thing instead of just being in the center. I'm beating it against the sides of the bowl. That will prevent any butters from sticking there and making sure it gets kind of thoroughly mixed. Okay, so we'll add 1 more cup after that, and then our frosting will be made, but I think this is ready to flip over. And then we are going to be doing, this time it's going to be getting our final crisping up on it. So we'll crisp this side up 1 more time, and we're going to crisp that one. So this is our color and our blood, our melting stage. Oh, and you always get an escapee. Put it back in there. So, perfect. Okay, let me just look over, see my time. Oh good, we've got just about 2 minutes left on our cupcakes. So perfect timing, everything is gonna come together just perfectly. So 1 more cup of powdered sugar. And I'm gonna add it in here and then mix it again slowly. You don't wanna go on fast speeds. And use a big bowl because otherwise, again, cheese frosting that we will be topping our banana spice cupcakes with. Beautiful. So we've got our nice cream cheese frosting. When I'm making it, I use about a cup of sugar per like 4 ounces of powdered sugar per 4 ounces of butter or cream cheese. It's kind of like gives you the right sweetness. Sometimes I feel like frosting can get overly sweet, and I'm not a huge fan of that. Now let me get a spatula out. Let's check these real quick. Good. Hold you guys together. Okay, we're getting our last little flip in. Let's tuck these guys in there. Put them in there. And we're gonna do our final crisping up on here. And I'm gonna get our spatula for our frosting, and we're just gonna scoop this around and mix it. Just make sure there's no pockets of powdered sugar. And then I'm gonna go get a pastry bag to put it in so we can pipe it over our cupcakes. You could easily spread it. If you don't have a pastry bag but want the look, you could put it in a Ziploc baggie and squeeze it over. So let me grab my pastry bag real quick. I buy these in bulk. You can get like 200 of them for like 10 bucks on Amazon. And it just gives you a nicer look on your cupcake. But it's not that hard. I really never use a point because I'm not about the full decorating. I just do the pretty swoosh on it, and it works out great. So we're gonna put our first scoop in. And put it in there. And our next scoop. Fill it up. And you don't have to worry about trying to get your cream cheese down to the bottom. It will get there on its own when you kind of push it through. Okay, let's go. We can take a pause on this because I can hear our cupcakes cooking, but let me check these, see how they're cooking up. Perfect, so I'm gonna turn these off, pull them off the heat, and I'm gonna let them sit right there. Now let me check on our cupcakes. Oh, these look like they are done. You can see how the cupcakes are done, but if you look over at the bundt, it is not done yet. It takes about twice as long to cook the bundt cake as it does the cupcakes. So these have a nice dome on the top. And let me turn this off, and I'm gonna set my timer for 20 more minutes so I don't forget about my bundt cake in there. So these are our beautiful banana, put this over here, cupcakes. They smell so nice. They have that, the cinnamon, the cloves, and the nutmeg give them that just nice spice scent to them, which will pair lovely with the cream cheese frosting. So I've got my bag of cream cheese here. We're gonna twist it up. I'm not going to frost all of them right now because you do want your cupcake to cool down, but I will frost one for you guys so you can see how we're gonna have it served. But we're gonna start with our melts. We're gonna put here, I've got our beautiful steak and cheddar melts. I'm gonna move them on here, and then I'm gonna cut through them so you can see how delicious. You can hear that nice crunch of the sourdough. And you've got the nice cheese there. Look at that beautiful steak and cheddar melt. Nice crust on both sides. Absolutely delicious. Okay, let's do our cupcake real quick. We're gonna put one of them on and show you how it looks. So I'm gonna pull up one. I've cut my tip, and I'm just gonna squeeze my frosting down. And I'm gonna pull one out so that it will be easier for me to frost. So I'm gonna do a nice little swirl around. It's gonna be nice and hot, so it will melt off. So we've got our pretty swirl. And then what I like to do is just sprinkle it with a little bit of cinnamon sugar. And this is our beautiful banana spice cupcake that we'll be serving with, it'll be our dessert. for lunch today. We have our steak and cheddar melt. Delicious. Well, guys, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live cooking shows every single day. Feel free to send us a message or comment if you have any recipes you'd like to see or have any cooking questions. Again, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.